Hello. Today we have a webinar about history of disinformation in 20th century. As all of us, we know that disinformation started in Soviet Union already in 1920s. In 1920s, Soviet secret services and Soviet secret apparatus has elaborated a program and projects for disinformation, which had to support Soviet foreign policy. So today we have a very distinguished guest, and this is Dr. Malgorzata Bonikowska, who is the president of the Center for International Relations. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. We need to know that this webinar is conducted within the grant provided by the Polish Foreign Ministry in the framework of its public diplomacy task 2023. Dr. Bonikowska, all of us, we know that Soviet disinformation, as it started, as I taught already in 1920s, later it was developed in 1950s, used many tactics. As you know, it were agents of influence in the West who actually infiltrated foreign media, because Soviet Union was quite sophisticated in its tactics and strategies. So they use foreign agents to infiltrate foreign media and spread disinformation, spread fake news. So how would you define fake news and disinformation in historical context?
Yeah, hello, thank you very much for this question, because I think it's exactly what the problem is all about. You know, fake news and all the problems we are facing with social media. The reason is our natures, just human nature. We lie, we create false reality. We do it since our childhood. And, you know, it just happens that in a way, fake news understood as spreading out not correct information or something which we can even call a lie, started the same like communication between the people. So it's as ancient as our civilizations, really. And of course, it was always done also by the rulers, by the people in power, because they wanted the others to believe that they are the best, that they are doing right things. So this is per se, you know, nothing very new in history. But of course, in 20th century, the scale started to be very different. And in 21st century, as today, we are facing a completely new reality because of completely new dimensions of spreading the fake news. So let's just compare. Earlier in history, we were having a very narrow circle of people who were communicating, who were, you know, spreading the news at all. And this was going until, let's say, the era of mass media, which started with enlightenment, generally speaking, so 18th century. And then in 19th century, the communication for all, understood as newspapers, for example, was quite popular, and people started really to massively read. And this is what we mention always when we talk about history of fake news, that the first fake news, we can quote the article from 1835 in the US. There was a publication in the Sun newspaper, the Sun Daily, about creatures on the moon, with even, you know, design, how they look like. So people started to believe in that because this was a very specific era at that time, where a lot of new things started to appear around the people, and people were ready mentally to believe in anything, because they had to somehow accept the existence of railways and trains. Then they had to accept an existence of telegrams sending, you know, telephone, then photography, gramophones, finally light, the bulbs. You know, 19th century was an incredibly creative century with a lot of new, completely new techniques and technologies and devices. So people were ready to see whatever. And that's the base why fake news are so dangerous to us then, but also today. Today, the scale is incredibly more important and also more dangerous because we have social media. And this is a relatively new phenomenon, social media, because earlier, don't forget, we were always consuming the media created by somebody else. This was so-called classical media. We had editors, we had restrictions of access. Not everybody was able to publish. If you wanted to publish a text in the newspaper, you had to write to the editor, and the editors were controlling and also rejecting very often the publications. Now, with the growth of importance and also scale of use of social media, every one of us can put anything we want anywhere in the internet, in the social space. We have communicators, we have channels such as Facebook or X, former Twitter. We can have so many other ways, like even websites, and many places we can put these pieces of information, whatever we want, whenever we want, any way we want. Never happened before. That's a completely new phenomenon. But in the same time, the human nature remains the same. We are all emotional. We all want to present ourselves from the best perspective. We all are ready to lie sometimes, or not to tell the whole truth, at least. And if people, individuals do it, it's one problem. But if the countries, the states, the governments, especially of countries who are not seen as friends, who are our enemies, start doing it regularly on the basis of a regular strategic approach to these channels and to this human nature, then we face a major problem, because they create pieces of information, they put these pieces in the internet, believing that the people react in a certain way. And that's exactly what disinformation means today.
What do you say? How to define, because now there is war in Ukraine, yes, and definitely Russian propaganda somehow it has its roots, the same as disinformation in the Soviet Union. They try to use the same tools, yes, but what's the difference, and what are main Russian activities? What is the common characteristics of Russian disinformation now? We know we are also affected by Russian disinformation in social media, even if Russian outlets in Polish language has been blocked. Still, the Kremlin spreading disinformation in Poland via its social media, via trolls farms. So, what's your take on this?
Let's go back to what you mentioned 100 years ago, when Soviet Union started as a state. What they started that time, it's a very sophisticated, elaborated propaganda instruments, and not only instruments, a propaganda machine. It was not only Soviet Union, the same was done in the Nazi Germany. And, we all know and remember from the 30s in what way the people in Germany was really brainwashed with the massive impact the propaganda had on the people's brains and people's way of thinking. 100 years later, the Russian Federation took this kind of experience, and the experience was long because it lasted the whole Soviet Union, meaning until 1991, when Soviet Union finally collapsed. But the approach was very clear: to build a very effective disinformation machine with money, extremely huge amounts of money spent by the state for doing that. We are talking about more than $300 million every year right now. Many people, thousands of people working in these trolls factories, and a specific understanding how today social media work and also how people react. And we see that the massive scale of doing that started more or less when Crimea was taken by Russia in 2014, because there were a lot of things to explain to the public. and there was this kind of hybrid war done by Russia. It was not an open attack. So a lot of disinformation pieces were put in the internet in order to spread out those news who were good for the whole operation. For example, that Crimea was really not Ukrainian, that this was a Russian right to take it, that this was an autonomous part, that was really a referendum, and the referendum was accepted, that people voted. So in a way, we can say some of these elements were based on certain reality, but the whole message was recreated in order to present the whole event in a certain specific way. But since 2014, Russia elaborated much more sophisticated tactics, which is basically to spread out different messages and different narrative to different countries and different people. Because of course, Central Eastern Europe, or largely speaking, the West, that the receiver, that's the major audience for this activity, not the only one, but the major one. And we should believe in Russian thinking, we should believe what they tell us. So in order to fit into the messages, with the messages into the national cycle, you have to follow how the society thinks, what are the weaknesses and what are the typical characteristics of every single nation. For example, in the Polish case, there is not much ground really for being openly, decisively pro-Kremlin. We don't have a Russian minority in Poland. We don't really have huge Orthodox church. We have certain Orthodox, around 300,000 people, maybe more, but it's not really a very huge minority vis-a-vis the rest of the population. And we don't have really this tradition, because Poland vis-a-vis Russia, even during the Tsar period, we were always being hesitating as far as our thinking about Russia. So the pro-Russia or pro-Kremlin base, it is hard to base on something like that in Poland. While in countries like Slovakia, for example, or even more distant countries like Italy, like France, like Spain, where there is quite a pro-Russian intelligentsia in a sense of culture, in a sense of history, tradition. These countries see Russia more like a partner, like a country far away, especially in case of Italy or Spain or France. They don't have a direct border with Russia, so they don't feel any threat. So in this case, these kind of sentiments that, okay, Russians want something they have right for, or we should take into consideration the Russian interest. And then maybe Ukraine is not really existing as a nation. Maybe Ukraine is really a part of Russia per se. So these kind of messages were spread out there. It could be very easily taken. Slovakia, countries like Slovakia, they have also very close, geographical proximity towards Russia, but they have also a strong Russian minority. And they are also, by tradition, there are some people who are very pro-Russian. So in this regard, you can build a different narrative, more openly pro-Kremlin. Or in countries like Bulgaria or Serbia, where historically speaking, Russia played a very important role in the history of these countries, positive role, because under Tsar, both Serbia and Bulgaria were liberated out of the Turks, out of Ottoman Empire, and they got the independence thanks to help from Tsarist Russia, Imperial Russia. Of course, the perception of Russia historically will be different, will be good. It is considered a friend, and also it is a very huge base of the Orthodox religion. So it's a proximity of traditions, cultures, behaviors, customs. So in this regard, you can spread out, you can build the messages differently. So Russia knows it, and Russia, what they started to do, and they still doing it, they are, first of all, adapting the messages and narrative to the particular country, to the particular situation. And also they use not only the sphere of arguing about Russia and not Russia and Ukraine, etc., but they are also trying to elaborate messages around issues they find in every single country. For example, Poland and Ukraine had a difficult history. There are some moments in our history which are not easy to discuss. So everywhere in moments like that, Russian propaganda will use this fact and will try to recall these moments in order to build walls between the nations, create problems, encourage bad emotions. And in this regard, it's nothing about Russia at all. It's more about how we see each other, how many obstacles suddenly we discover, how many problems we see they are between us. So, in other words, Russians try to divide Europeans in all possible elements. Every single moment they see that there is a discrepancy, there is a problem, there is a conflict, Russian propaganda can use it in order to create fake news and disinform people, to build negative emotions, and of course, in consequence, reaction of people, which would be good for Russia.
The situation, the very problem, has become very complex with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So it's interesting to know how Poland, how the European Union is defending itself against Russian intrusion, Russian disinformation, and actually what we as a society, what we have to do to be successful, to be efficient and effective in this protection and defense against Russian disinformation.
Thank you for this question, because that's, of course, the most important question today put to all of us: how to defend our countries, how to defend also the European Union as a notion, as an actor, how to defend the West, because Russia definitely sees the West now as an enemy. The West as a whole, and also every single country who is a Western country, and who also now is part of the coalition, which is pro-Ukrainian. You know that over 50 countries engaged in order to help Ukraine to say no to the aggressor. And we strongly believe it's the right thing to do, because if we don't do that, if Ukraine fails, it will be worse for the whole world, because it will be evident that the politics of violating international law and just being aggressive to the neighbors and of attacking a neighbor in order to regulate the border issues or even to control the whole country in the neighborhood wins. We cannot do that. So communication is as important as the war in the battlefield. And disinformation campaign done by Russia is, we can just put it similarly to the war itself, to the Russian army approaching or, entering Ukraine at the beginning of the invasion. There are parallel two wars which go head to head. And we have to just be aware of that is the war, and we should behave like in the state of war. We are at war with Russia in the communication sense, for sure. Russia is aggressor in our communication space. Russia is a very, very active player in the internet, in our social media, but even in the classical media, through Russian Today, but also through certain people and messages they are even able to spread into the classical traditional media like television, radio, or press. Once we are aware of that, we have to, like always, we have to have a distance to what we hear or see or read. The distance is very important in order to see, okay, what is this piece of information all about? Who wrote it? Who is the author? What are the sources? From where this information comes? To be able to check if we can just rely on that, or if we should really have doubts. It is easier in traditional media. It is more difficult in the internet, because we can find everything in the internet, and in different channels we sometimes lose really the orientation from where we took it. but we have to double check and triple check. And next step will be always to think about what to do with this piece of information. If we have doubts, let's not spread it again. Let's not forward it to anyone else. Let's be careful. And let's always remember, if there is something which is very negative about the West, about European Union, about our neighbors, about other people who are with us traditionally seen as partners, let's be really careful who spreads this information. If this is really something we should follow, we should believe in that, because it may be not our scenario. It's maybe not really our feeling we should feel. It is somebody else who wants us to feel that way. It is somebody else who tells us what to think, how to feel, what to do. We shouldn't want to do that. We should think ourselves. We should just go back to the common sense and rational, critical thinking in order to think ourselves. Is this really something I believe in? Is this really something I think it may be true? Let's just put these questions to ourselves. And I think that's the best method, because we are entering into an era, we will be having more and more problems in even recognizing if this is a fake or this is even a deep fake. If this photography we are seeing, it's a real something which was photographed, or this is a completely fake place which does not exist. Or if we hear an interview with somebody, is this a real person, or maybe it's an avatar, or maybe it's a created, artificially created vision of a human who does not exist at all. Or if we see a politician, even a very well-known politician, a prime minister or president, saying some things we hardly believe in, if this is really happening, if this is a real interview, or maybe it's a deep fake. It's something which was artificially created and put on air in order to create chaos, in order to disinform us, in order to follow what is completely not true. As, by the way, already happened several times in the history of communication. I was mentioning this article in The Sun from 19th century, but we can also mention the famous story about Orson Welles and the radio program he produced in the 20s about the people from the creatures from Mars coming to the American town, and because it was no vision, just audio, it was done such a extremely professional way that people just believed in that and started to run away massively. So this can be an effect, that we will do something which is not rational, we'll do something in panic, we'll do something in a hurry just because we will start feeling something. Let's just be careful.
It seems that the disinformation problem will not cease anytime soon, especially now with the war in Ukraine, with the geopolitical tensions around the world. So a problem actually will be increasing in time. So what can defend us, I think, is education. So what do you think, what is the role of education on the any level, actually, starting from maybe not kindergarten, but primary school to universities, and who should do this? Non-governmental organizations, government, the European Union as an institution. Who, in your view, is best suited to do this?
You are very right. Education is absolutely basic, especially when we think about democracies, democratic societies. That's, by the way, not only connected with disinformation phenomenon. It is a base of democracy. Democracy cannot work without well-educated civil society, because we are not citizens otherwise. We are just a mob who could be also manipulated. So democracy, especially advanced democracy, a 21st century democracy, needs very well prepared citizens. So education is the must. And the part of this democratic education, you know, when people are aware of our rights, our obligations, they are aware of how the countries work, they are aware what is really community and how to build it, and how to be a part of it. Communication is basic as well, and everything we can learn about how to communicate properly, and also what to do or how to avoid such phenomena like misinformation, for example. So the creating chaos without a bad intention, right? That we misinform the others because we ourselves think that that's like that. So we forward pieces of information to somebody else. So we start to be a part of this disinformation propaganda machine. To be able not to do that, we need to learn the capacities of informing properly, communicating in a certain way with all these elements of cautious, which I mentioned already. I would compare it to literacy. It's the same like the West was fighting illiteracy for centuries, and we were able finally to reach 99%, 99 level of literacy in our societies. So everybody is able to read and write, and everybody goes to school, and even more, they are obliged to go to school, and the state is obliged to provide public education. So now we are entering into the era where we are again illiterate. We became again illiterate, in a sense, not of writing or reading, but in the sense of being able to communicate with all the tools given in 21st centuries. When we have mobile phones, we have communication applications like WhatsApp or Instagram, when we have deepfake, fake news, disinformation, when we have a very strong, massive propaganda from the countries who don't want us to be normal societies. And we are in the middle of that, a democratic society, meaning we have opinions, we express our views, we feel that we should really speak, participate in the public life. This is all good, but we have to be aware. Now it's at a different level. So we have to learn not only what is happening around us, but also how to be careful in order to, it's like among the mines, we have to just be careful to walk and in order to be able to avoid problems. And I would call this kind of knowledge that media literacy is necessary. So media literacy is something which fights illiteracy of our era, of our age. That yes, we know how to write and read, but that's not enough in the era of new technology, in the time of the fifth industrial revolution, AI and internet and social media. We have to learn more. And we also have, I would compare it to a vaccine. Like during pandemic, you remember we all were talking about vaccine because the virus came into our system. Same with fake news and deep fake. There is a virus in the system, and in a way, we have to take a vaccine against this virus. The best vaccine is a critical thinking and using our own brain, you know, common sense plus awareness of how many tools, how many techniques can be used to disinform us. In this regard, education helps, not only adults, as you rightly said, pupils, kids, in the kindergarten even, the same way like we learn our democracy as a system. We should learn how to be able to communicate in the era where it's many more challenges, much more difficult than just writing and reading.
Thank you very much for your insights. Nowadays, we are really flooded by ocean of information, disinformation, fake news, and deep fakes. And actually, what is the problem is that fact-checking has become increasingly difficult because what we are experiencing is actually a non-stop flow of information and events and messages on social media around the clock, actually. So even professional journalists have problems with fact checking because nobody's able, and actually no newspaper has such finances, to check all this flow, which we are experiencing. So it's very difficult issue, and I think it's going to be more difficult. So as you said, I think that critical thinking and educating kids, already kids and young generation, critical thinking in diversification of sources of information is really most important tool to fight disinformation for future, because the problem will not cease, the problem will stay with us. Yes, so what would be your final advice to all of us as regards disinformation, your final thoughts, such a clue what is needed, what should be done, and what should we remember when we consume information every day? Actually, now we are almost attached to our smartphones, to social media. What's your advice? I mean, to young people, to young generation, to adults, to all of us?
Thank you for this question. I think the most important is to use your own brain, to remember that the brain exists. We are humans. We don't need to rely on artificial intelligence. We have our own natural intelligence. Every one of you, every one of us, it is a common sense. So let's use our brain, first of all, in everything we do, in everything we read, in everything we see or hear. That's number one rule. Number two rule is let's wait a little before we do something with this, what we are getting, piece of information. Let's just reflect a little bit longer than just a second, because this may stop us from an action which will be a stupidity to do. Let's just take a short little mental break, a distance from what we are reading or seeing. Let's just put to ourselves just a few questions, or let's count to 10, or let's just sleep it overnight. Let's not react immediately, because this will give us maybe a different perspective. And last thing, number three, is let's just follow, let's really educate, let's really catch up with a massively, incredibly fast development of technologies to be aware of what can be done in the media, in the communication sector, because more we know, more tools we have, which could be very good tools also, which can help us, like AI, for example. But in the same time, this gives us awareness what can be done behind our back, what can be done with us without even us seeing this. So we don't want to be manipulated by anyone, and only knowledge gives us awareness what can happen.
So I think we can stop with these insights, because I think they give us real weapons against disinformation, against propaganda from whatever direction it could come. Yes, so now we know even more that the best tool is critical thinking, diversification of sources, and that we cannot just consume. We have to think while consuming what we consume, actually. Yes, and that is
thinking is always good, for people. Thinking is really our strength. Thinking is what we can do best as people.
Yeah, thank you very much. Our guest today was Dr. Malgorzata Bonikowska, the president of the Center for International Relations and member of Team Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.